Welcome.
Good morning, Vijay.
So Petra, what did you make of our regenerative agriculture session just now? As a scientist and company leader at your firm, what did you make of our practitioners?
There's so much I could undermine and underwrite from what has been said. We need change at scale. Because if you look at agriculture, it's probably one of the sectors, the industries that has the biggest impact on our planet, on the health of our planet, next to energy. You know, it's 30% of greenhouse gas emission in the food system. It's freshwater use, biodiversity loss through land use change. So really, it's the sector where we have most impact, but also where we can make most of a difference, because the soil scientists know and have calculated if you get your farming practices right, you can store carbon in soil and you can mitigate up to a quarter to a third of all man-made emissions. So that's a fundamental.
I mean, it's often overlooked, right? But the land use portion, when we study the IPCC reports, shows significant potential. We talk a lot about energy. We talk a lot less about agriculture. And
I'm glad to hear more of it today.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And one of the things within the agricultural picture that also gets overlooked is the productivity gap, tremendous productivity gap. Of course, someone like Bill Gates has spent the last 20 years talking about this and trying to fund improvements in agricultural productivity in Africa. But more broadly, what do you see from your perspective on if we look at the most productive fields in the world, or even any given country versus the least productive? It's massive opportunity to spread best practice, to leapfrog. Why is it so slow? Again, this is a story I've written 20 years ago. I've followed for a couple of decades. The progress seems to be quite slow. Why are we? There's been talk of a new green revolution for Africa, as in Norman Borlaug, who I got to know, the original, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for bringing around helping bring the first green revolution in agriculture. In his later days in Mexico, when I was bureau chief in Mexico, I used to spend time with him to learn and appreciate some of the hardships those early innovators had to go through, and the naysayers in their way, but also the role of collaboration, the UN centers on investment, and the role of the private sector and public sector working together. What's different now? What do we need to see increases in productivity while being mindful of the impact on nature, as we've just heard from our colleagues?
I think it's important we look at productivity. In the past, in particular, we have been looking at productivity to secure supply chains. That's what we heard, to secure the income of the farmer, because that's still where he or she makes most money off. But productivity is much more. Productivity is also a means to reduce the footprint of a produce if we produce more on the same amount of land. And productivity also means we have enough biomass, not only for food, but also for fuel and for fiber and everything we need. So we must not lose sight of productivity. The OECD says if we want to feed the people and have all the needs, we need to triple the increases. And the way to do this is with technology. A lot of engagement we do as a company, we research to help farmers, give them tools, digital tools and products to maintain productivity, increase productivity with lower impact.
What's the role of biological solutions in all of this? That's historically, I think we're seeing a wave of innovation in these. How does that help the farmers, do you think?
We heard about the concern that with regenerative practices, the yield is going down first, Right. So we research on biostimulants, which is like supplements that help crops become more drought resistant, that help crops, to utilize fertilizer better.
Do they enhance soil health, or what's the mechanism of action there?
It's either soil health enhancement or it's binding of nitrogen from the air. There are very different instruments. It's also micronutrients, that make the cell of the plant more stable. So it's various mechanisms, and we have a lot of research trying to help farmers understand how the biostimulants can secure the yield in a changing regenerative practice environment.
The data I've seen suggests that maybe a third of global soils are already degraded, and we're on the pathway towards the vast majority, 80-90% of global soil being degraded by 2050 on current trends. Do you think these biologicals are the big solution to this, or do we need some stronger and maybe broader systemic changes in how we do agriculture?
Biologicals can be a technology to support what needs to happen, but we also need to think in terms of soil restoration. So, for example, there's in Brazil a lot of degraded pasture land. There's a huge potential for more agricultural production. And we are working with farmers there, and in line with what the previous panel said, we need to build this ecosystem. You need finance for the farmer. You need tools for the farmer. We have seeds that are that grow well in these depleted conditions. You need science to understand what you are doing. And so in this environment, we have the aim to restore 1 million hectares of degraded pasture land.
Is that Brazil only or globally?
No, that's Brazil only, and we already have achieved 240,000 hectares. So that's well on track. So if you build these ecosystems, then products are only one part of it.
What's being grown on these renewed farmlands? What kind of crops are being grown there?
It's soy, corn, and cattle in rotation.
I see. The environmental pressures as well is another dimension, right? Well, the greenhouse gases, of course, associated with agriculture are significant. We talked a little bit about that. There are technologies for low-till agriculture, so additives that can provide fixing, as it were, of carbon. There's a move to try to amortize or to monetize these, I should say, through credits. What do you think of some of this effort to see this ag as a solution or one of the important tools for dealing with greenhouse gas mitigation? I'll give the rebuttal immediately. There are those who see this as a false trail, as a problematic area, simply because unlike direct air capture or engineered solutions, you don't have permanence, or you cannot possibly know what's going to happen 1 year to the next. We know there's a huge variability when we look at forests or soils, and whether there are net sinks or net emitters from satellite data. So is this an area that it doesn't make a lot of sense to look to help deal with climate change? We should do this for other reasons: sustainability, farmers, local conditions, water, better quality food, things we've talked about already, not particularly to deal with the carbon problem.
I think carbon is an integrated part of the problem. So we need to enable farmers to apply these regenerative practices at scale. And for that, you also need the financial framework. So I know all the issues with additionality and permanence. We need to get over this. We have better satellites coming, because without a finance system at scale, it's harder to achieve. And we don't have much time left. The other, of course, is, don't forget, it's the whole ecosystem. It's the role of productivity, the enabling farmers to produce as much on the existing land, also to avoid land use change.
Yeah.
And so we like to believe that if done well, actually all crop protection and all technology is actually also climate protection at the end of the day.
Let's get the lights up. Let's see if we have a question to follow on for our speaker. If any of you want, we've talked about agriculture for a bit now. I imagine we have some questions in the room. Anybody who want to put a question on any GMO advocates, anti-GMO advocates? We are in Europe. I'll have you know. We have two hands go up. There we go. Okay, let's go to this lady here. We'll have a question. The Economist has long argued that Europe's blocking of GMOs is unscientific. And I think the last 20 years of field trials have shown in Southeast Asia and Brazil and the US that the claims made by the European scientific establishment and politicians on GMOs, on human health, have been unfounded. I think that's the very clear evidence. But anyway, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm Sophie Hammond. I'm from Schneider Electric and also used to work on GMOs in molecular genetics. So I am a GMO advocate. But my question is actually slightly different. So yesterday it was announced by the UK government and DEFRA that they would no longer grant new sustainable practice investments for farmers from today onwards. How do you think that impacts the sort of role of regenerative agriculture and some of the things you've talked about today, and actually the need for GM crops?
I think if you look at climate change, only 5% of climate transition funds are going into agriculture, even though it's the biggest, second biggest emitter.
Yeah.
So you could say agricultural subsidies are a great way to also channel money to more ecosystem services. It's still not happening at scale, and what you describe of the UK is certainly a backlash. So we need to then work in partnerships. Again, like the panel said, we need to have the traders, the commodity traders, everybody in the value chain aligned to supply the incentives that are not coming through the public funding.
We have a quick question in the back. Gentleman there.
Thank you. Richard Profit from the Cool Farm Alliance. Petra, could you say more on the role of industry collaboration to drive the agricultural change and transition needed?
So the role of which?
Industry collaborations.
You mean amongst companies?
Yeah.
You know, everything you want to get at scale, you need standards, right? And so we are very happy for the Cool Farm tool. I think we have integrated it also in some of our software to allow farmers track their emission profile. Mm-hmm. And so the more and the faster we drive standards, the better. And I think that's also being seen across our competitors. So very happy about that. If we want to make real progress, another thought is we need to have cheaper verification systems at scale, and we hope we can achieve that together, Richard.
I think there's one more question I see in the back there. Do you have a microphone? Great. We'll make it a quick one.
Thank you. Hi, thanks. My name is Manuela Sali from Nexant Consultancy. Just a question about your thoughts on the new revolution, on the technological revolution on food production. You know, they're talking about these stacked farms and minimal fertilizer use. Is there any sort of thought that you can give us on where that's going?
Yeah, is the future of farming vertical and high tech?
Exactly.
What do you think about that? I don't know how Andy would feel about that. He might not be so excited to have high-rise farms, but let's see what you think.
I think the high-tech solution is for certain crops, right? We distinguish between field crops and then specialty crops and vegetables, and there's a lot going on in seeds, fruit, and herbs, fruit, and stuff that is growing in these systems. I don't think it's a solution for field crops at scale for the time being, but it's a very welcome complement, of course.
Although you might see a diverse future, right? In the your company, your parent company is Chinese, of course. In China, where I used to be bureau chief, it's one of the world's leading centers for developing vertical and advanced kinds of tools of farming, in part because of scarcity of land and the pressures of population and the demands for agriculture, as well as a culture that's pro-innovation, quite leaning into some of the more advanced approaches. So you might, in the Middle East as well, we're seeing this in the Emirates and Saudi going quite heavily in this direction due to their resource constraints. So I would say watch this space. You ask a very interesting question. There may be different solutions in different parts of the world that emerge, and that might well be, just as we see with different kinds of climate solutions being relevant for different parts of the world. We're just out of time. Thank you. Please give my guest a nice round of applause.